today's session, we're going to be talking, as it says on the screen there, about the Google Core Web Vitals that are rolling out in June. So first of all, just want to say a big thank you to Louise and the Cambridge Network team for letting us come along today and do the webinar. So thank you. And our aim is really to make this sort of a practical, insightful session for you all. So what you're going to get from today's session, so we're going to provide an overview of the update, what's included in it and sort of why you would care about it. And also, like I mentioned there, some real actionable insights and tools that you can take away with you and actually use on your website. Also, just to mention, we are also going to be providing a resources sheet after the session. So Louise is going to be sending around a follow-up with the resources sheet with all of the tools and everything that we mentioned in today's session. So don't worry about sort of trying to furiously scribble down everything that we sort of talk about in here. We are going to follow it up with that as well. So you'll have that with you. So, so for anybody that doesn't know Granite 5, hopefully some of you on the line do, but for anybody that doesn't, so we're 21 years old, so we've been going for quite some time. We're an award-winning digital marketing agency with 14 in-house digital marketing experts. We've got a wealth of experience in web development, design, SEO, PPC, and full digital marketing services. And we look after businesses right from sort of small businesses right up to large organisations. And as it says on the slide there, we're rather good at performance optimization, which gives you a bit of a hint as to why we've been asked to come and talk about this topic today. So at my point now, I will shut up. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague, James Wilmington-Smith, who is our head of digital marketing. So James has been in the industry for quite some time. He probably won't want me to put a figure on it, but he is certainly very, very experienced in sort of SEO, PPC, all things digital. And as one client calls him, he's a Google man. So you can tell he's certainly the right person for the job for this webinar. So without further ado, I will pass over to James.
Thanks, Catherine. Let's go and look at the first slide. We're going to ask a question straight off the bat. It's a little quiz question for everyone. If anyone can answer, tell me what 2.5 means or is. If you could pop your answer into the chat, there'll be an enormous prize. I think we're going to be bigged up on Granite 5 Social, which is seen, of course, by millions around the world. So what is 2.5? So Google have been making this is a little introduction to kind of give you a kind of baseline of where we are in terms of Google and their updates. I've been in this business, as Catherine said, for about 300 years. But the first big updates came at the kind of beginning of the kind of 2010, 2011. Google make about 100, 200 updates every single year. But it's unusual for them to tell us exactly what's coming and give us this much notice. So if we go back in time, Panda was a great big hairy update which came in 2011, which was all about getting rid of poor quality content. 2012 we had the Penguin update, which is all about manipulative link schemes and keyword stuffing. You then had EAT, which is one of my favorite ones. EAT was the expertise, authority, trust update, which basically gave us an insight into how Google think about or how Google view websites, what they consider a good website and a bad website. 150 pages long, but a brilliant update. And then as we move into 2016, we had the first mobile friendly update. Then in 2018, we had mobile first indexing, and there was a shift from Google as time moves on. They moved away from just trying to put the bad SEO people out of business and more about improving the user experience. Obviously, from a Google point of view, there's huge benefits to them. The better the user experience is for their customers, the more advertising revenue they're going to make. But also from our point of view, also there's a lot of benefits in doing these improving the user experience. And now, of course, we've got the new one, which is the page experience update, which is now coming out in the next month or so. The bottom line is, for me, if Google give us notice, we generally take note. So as I said, they announced in May last year that they were in a very obscure post called Evaluating Page Experience for a Better Web. This is in May 2020, they told us this. At the same time, oh, one thing to mention now, they've now told us that the Core Vitals update isn't coming until mid-June sometime. So it's been delayed a little bit already. At the same time, in this article, they also told us that because we continue to work on identifying and measuring aspects of page experience, we plan to incorporate more page experience signals on a yearly basis to further align with evolving user expectations and increase the elements of user experiences we can measure. So what they're basically saying is this is just the first of a whole bunch of them coming through. So next year we might find they're going to start measuring first contentful paint. They might start mentioning TTFP, which is time to the first byte. So all these things are coming over the next year. This is just the start. If we look at the speed and user experience focus, we can see that what Google say, great page experiences, we can read that, enable people to get more done, engage more deeply. In contrast, a bad page experience could stand in the way of a person being able to find the valuable information on a page. So, but they started doing this around 2010 is when they first started looking at speed as an element in their algorithm. We didn't know exactly what that meant in terms of how much it impacted your website. I think you had to be pretty slow to be impacted. In 2018, they followed up with a page speed ranking factor in the mobile search results. And then in 2020, they had a whole bunch of new updates to form the initial page experience update, which we're seeing coming now. Bottom line, just in case you ain't worked it out, speeds matter for quite a while, but it matters more and more with every day going past. And why are we really worrying about it? I think the number there tells you 85% of the UK search market is on Google search engine. So if we're not doing what they say, you're likely to kind of lose out. Bottom line is Google hates slow websites. So why does it matter? Well, it matters to publishers because fast pages generally generate more leads, more sales, and more advertising revenue. Page performance, as I said before, is important to site visitors because it reduces the time it takes to get what they want. There's tons of stats out there about what sort of impact this has. There's a great one there. 1 second delay equals a 7% drop in conversions. An increase of 2 seconds for a page load time increases your bounce rate 32%. A 5-second increases your bounce rate 90%. That came from a study with Think with Google. But then you've got to think vice versa. If you increased your load time or improved your load time by 1 second, what would that mean in terms of your conversions? Will you convert more? How much will your bounce rate go down if you do the same thing? In 2019, Backlinko, who are kind of, well, he does backlinks basically, but he does a lot more than that. They studied, well, how many? 5 million desktop and mobile pages and found that the average web page loaded in 10.3 seconds on a desktop and over 25 seconds on a mobile, which is pretty terrible, which is why Google are really pushing this right now. The bottom line is you'll benefit from more traffic, more visibility, more sales, more leads, or donations of your charity if you're providing a great user experience. So let's get on to what are the core web vitals. Well, basically, they're a set of metrics developed by Google to help website publishers improve page performance for the benefit of site visitors, obviously. So we have three. We have LCP, we have CLS, and we have FID. LCP is largest contentful paint or loading time. CLS is cumulative layout shift or stability. And FID is first input delay or interactivity. But you should be aware that you need to meet all three of these to get the ranking boost, to set yourself apart from the competition. And also, initially, Google has said that these will only apply to mobile users. So it won't apply to desktop users initially, which is tough because we know that optimizing your page speed and your core web vitals for mobile is harder than it is for desktop generally. Second thing, when these things roll out in mid-June or June-ish time, they're going to roll out globally all at once. I mean, for instance, the mobile first indexing index change has just finished rolling out after 2 years. So it tells you how this is happening instantly on the same time across the globe. They've also told us, well, we can expect the targets will get tougher as user expectations change. So as the users kind of expect pages to load faster, expect to be even faster. And also, Google have also hinted that they may start displaying a good page experience badge in their search results. Evidence suggests this may be sooner rather than later. So combining these new metrics with these existing ranking factors. So we all a bunch of these. This is the page experience kind of metric table. So you can see at the top that you've got the new core web vitals. We've also got 4 that are already part of the algorithm. Things like mobile friendly, things like safe browsing, are you loading malware or viruses on other people's computers, HTTPS or SSL, and intrusive interstitials or big pop-ups blocking the whole page. Those are all part of this page experience update. Now, what Google have said, a number of people from Google have said, is that these are minor ranking factors. They're not going to be critical. The higher ups have said that relevance is still going to be the key aspect of the Google algorithm. So having an expert website, having authority and having trust is still going to be more important than these. But these could make the difference between being ahead of a competitor or being behind a competitor if you've got the same sort of website. Sorry, let's find my bit there. But then they've also said when they introduced this, they weren't exactly open with exactly how much it will impact you. What they have said is you'll have to wait to see until after it's released. So what this tells me from experience is that what often happens with Google when they launch a new algorithm update is they watch and learn and watch and listen and learn, and they may tweak the knob to make it a more stringent target, or they may reduce it if they think it's affecting too many websites. So it's kind of watch and wait, that one. But as I said, core vitals could make the difference in your search rankings, organic traffic and conversions. And if you consider all those other updates, mobile friendly and HTTPS, if you look at the first page of the search results now, you won't see many sites that aren't mobile friendly, that don't have SSL on them. So it kind of tells us that in a year or two, you'll need to be meeting these core web vital targets to be appearing on the first page of Google, almost certainly. But as I said, there are 200 other ranking factors out there that they use to judge sites and rank them. So let's get started on last contentful paint. This is how long it takes a page to load from the point of view of an actual user. In other words, it's the time it takes from clicking on a link to seeing most of the content on the screen. What they're really looking at is what they call the viewport, which is the actual page, the actual content within the page you're looking at. So not necessarily stuff below the fold, just the stuff on the page. And it's a measure, as I said, a measure of loading performance. So to provide a good user experience, Google is saying LCP should occur within 2.5 seconds of when the page first starts loading. So you can see on the right there in the diagram, you can see there's different stages of the website loading. You have LCP1, which is a piece of text, LCP2, that is the same thing, the next one, LCP3, next one as well. And then you've got the image. And that is the final piece. So that's the LCP they're going to measure. How long does it take from the page loading to when we saw that image? When that image is loaded, that's where they take the measurement from on a mobile initially. So what are the most common sources of, sorry, there's one, sorry, go back one more, sorry. One other thing is you've got a percentage at the top here. This is taken from the weighting given by Lighthouse. Lighthouse are a sort of Google-owned forum, and they kind of measure all these things. They're one of the tools we'll look at later, and they give a weighting based on what they consider is a user's perception of performance. So they give LCP, or largest contentful paint, 25%. This is easily the most stringent of the three new core vitals. The others are important, but not as important. This is very much tied, LCP is very much tied to page speed, which is already part of the algorithm. So let's have a look at the most common causes. So there's 3 common causes: a slow server, too many scripts and CSS files, or blocking the page loading, and then resources or images, videos, etc., blocking them off. So a slow server. Basically, the longer it takes the browser to receive content from the server, the longer it takes to render anything on the screen. Generally, if you've got a free or cheap hosting or on a shared server with no guarantees of speed and uptime, then sadly, you're likely to fail to meet the LCP targets. A quick stat here, according to Google, half of the sites online, 50% are slow. 10%, only 10% are fast, and then 40% are ranked average, or leaving a lot of room for improvement. So server is a really big one. And if you get a really fast server, you're not only going to improve LCP, you'll also improve FID, you'll improve CLS as well, because everything's happening faster. So less delay for the user. So what can you do? You can optimize your server or get a new server if it's a really poor host at the moment. Google recommends you aim for a server response time lower than 200 milliseconds. Everything over 500 milliseconds is an issue, and it's important this time is consistent. Be aware that's actually quite a tough target to get a server responding that time. From my own experience, we see some that are way slower than that. So there's a lot of room to improve that. Yeah, so faster server response time directly improves every single page load metric, as I said, including LCP. What else can you do? You can route users through a CDN or a content delivery network. This is basically a framework of distributed servers and data centers. They're geographically spread out to deliver content to users as fast as possible. So especially if you have very heavy content pages, lots of graphics, lots of video, lots of imagery, a CDN is probably a really good idea. Also, if you've got a widely distributed audience, if you're a global company with people all over the world looking at your website, this is by far the most efficient way and fastest way to get content in front of that user. Other advantages of CDN include 100% availability generally, because they have lots of servers, an increase in the number of concurrent users who can use your site, and you also get with most CDNs, you get extra security. For instance, we have a number of clients who use Cloudflare, which includes a free plan, but it does give you most of the goodies that you'll want from a CDN. Not all, but most. The third thing you could do to improve the speed of the site is web caching. Web caching is basically ensures fast delivery of content to visitors. So some of the content delivery networks offer caching as part of their service. If you have a WordPress site, there are caching plugins you can activate very quick, very easily. And basically what they do is they store the website for the user on the browser. So when the user comes back, it's much quicker to load. Second thing that's causes LCP to be failed by businesses or websites is the render blocking JavaScript and CSS. These basically JavaScript and CSS, if you don't know, are files that need to be loaded before the website can finish loading the content. So for instance, if you have a WordPress website, every site has a theme and plugins that add JavaScript and CSS files to the front end of the website. These scripts can increase your site's page load time and block the page. They consequently delay LCP, our largest contentful pain. The solution for that is to defer or reduce the size of any non-critical CSS and JavaScript to speed up the content on the web page. There are three solutions for this. Number one, you can minify your CSS. It's kind of like take out all the unneeded code that's within that CSS. Many of the plugins would do this for you, or the caching plugins tick the box, minify CSS, and that bit's done. Sometimes it's more complex than that. If you've got a very complex site, you might need to get a developer to look at it, or someone with real kind of in-depth knowledge of the code. For instance, WP Rocket, a caching plugin, will attempt to minify all your CSS files, combine them, and only load CS needed for the visible part of your website, which is perfect for LCP because it is only the visible bit of your website that's being looked at. However, be aware this could also affect the appearance of your website. So you do need to kind of thoroughly test your website on multiple devices and screen sizes before implementing any changes like this. Another thing you could do, another solution for the render blocking from the JavaScript and CSS is to defer non-critical CSS. So because LCP is only looking at the kind of viewport, what the user sees initially, any CSS or JavaScript not required for that viewport can be deferred till later in the page. Generally, it's more complex. Not something I could do, but it's something I'd get a developer to do. But it does mean it clears up a lot of the clutter that's trying to load when your initial page is trying to load. And for JavaScript, exactly the same things to be done. There you got to minify and compress JavaScript files, defer unused JavaScripts, etc. Slow resource times. This is the last reason. So we've got a slow server, resource hungry JavaScript to CSS, and then slow resources. So the resources are things like images, videos, background images, etc. So it's very important, and this is one that's fairly easy to do, is to download your images, compress them, re-upload them. There are tools out there, for instance, if you use WordPress, there are plugins that will automatically compress an image when you add it to the website. There are other things you can do there, so that you can preload importer resources, so you can assign priorities to different images that have been loaded onto your website. So anything that's maybe lower down the page, not required initially, you can load that one later on. There are other very clever things you could do, like you can use what's called adaptive serving, where the website knows the users in the middle of the Sahara Desert on a 2G mobile, so it will give them something else. It will give them a different, it'll render the page differently and take some of the stuff out, so it's not so slow for them. But obviously it's a bit more complex. That sort of covers LCP. So those LCPs, the time it takes to load the page, you need to get it below 2.5 seconds if you can. If not, you need to speed up your server, reduce the number of resources are loaded on your pages, or compress them, and speed up your CSS and JavaScript. First input delay. This basically looks at interactivity. So how long does it take for your browser to respond to an interaction first triggered by the user? I mean, we've all been there. You're waiting for the page to load. You want to click on a button, and it won't let you because the page is still busy trying to load itself in the background. So this is, Google have brought this in specifically to measure how quickly can users interact with that content. This is, we'll look at this a bit more in tools, but basically FID is cannot be simulated in a lab environment. It needs a user to interact. So some of the tools that are lab-based, you won't be able to measure FID on those tools. You'll need to use like Google Search Console or PageSpeed Insights to get a real view of how you're performing for FID. But basically FID is, how's it caused? The most common source of poor FID is it's caused by images and scripts downloading what they call a non-orderly manner. So this disorder in coding causes a web page to kind of pause, start, pause again. It's a bit like a traffic jam with no roundabouts or traffic lights. Everyone's just trying to go everywhere at once. So it's the kind of the solution to this is to add kind of behaviors to the CSS and the scripts to make them load in an orderly manner. So things like breaking up long tasks. Sorry, Catherine. Breaking up, taking a breath. Breaking up long tasks. Long tasks are a sign of potential JavaScript bloat. So when you look at some of the tools you'll see kind of 2.3 seconds to execute this piece of JavaScript. Now, you need to look at that, break it up. Can you remove it from, so it's not impacting the page, etc. That's probably about what you can do for FID. So it's basically about getting order to your code on the page.
Hi James, we've got a quick, it's Louise. We've got a quick question from Martin Brown on FID in the chat. He says, doesn't it depend on users' internet speed?
No, because that's factored into the core web vitals. They look at the 75th percentile, so they discount anyone with a really slow speed. So they won't be counting the figures. There's bound to be an element of that. But if you look at the tools don't replicate what you've got. They have their own kind of, they use their own kind of, they use a MotoGP G4 device. So yeah, there will be an element of that, but Google try to discount that from the calculations. I don't know if that answers the question.
Hopefully. Hopefully that's answered the question. No response. I should carry on.
Carry on. Okay, cumulative layout shift. This is the last one and probably the least important from the point of view of Google and the core Web Vitals. This is when you get pages moving around when you land on it, and you go to click on something and it doesn't work. So for instance, you're trying to go back, and you click on no go back, and it submits your order instead. It happens to a lot of us, and this is caused by things jumping around on the screen as they load. It's a brand new metric developed by Google. It's not something we've ever measured before, and it's the only one that doesn't use time. It actually measures through kind of how much the visible content shifted in the viewport, as well as the distance they moved in the viewport. And I'll be honest, I can't remember what 0.1 stands for, but when you look at the tools, it will tell you what 0.1 is. But basically, that's the target to provide a good CLS experience. And this one is reasonably straightforward to solve because it's about the elements moving around. It's about putting in placeholders. So if you've got an image that's going to load in the viewport or on the page, put in a placeholder so it's got a space there waiting for it. So rather than not, if you don't include that, what happens is the image shoots onto page and pushes all the content down. If you've already told the browser there's going to be an image here, then the text will be in the right place straight off the bat. So you don't have to worry so much about it. So that's probably the biggest thing here is always include width and height size attributes with your images and video elements. Also with any ads, embeds or iframes or dynamically injected content if you can. Any sort of content that's going to load later on the page, save its space so it stops the page shaking around and moving about. Tools. There's lots and lots of tools. Probably the one you need to kind of pay the most attention to is the Google one, which is Google Page Speed Insights. This gives you Page Speed Insights provides both lab and field data for your core Web Vitals performance, but also for your page speed performance as well. So it'll tell you, obviously page speed has been in the algorithm for quite a while. We suspect that the need for speed will get even greater, as I said earlier. So I must pay attention to that one primarily. It will provide field data if there's enough available. So what Google are using here for core Web Vitals, if it's available, is real user data. So if there's enough visits to your website and enough data, you'll get a real view of what's going on in terms of core Web Vitals. If not, you'll get lab data, and the lab data is provided through Lighthouse, which is a kind of, I don't know what you call them, they're sort of offshoot of Google. And Lighthouse will give you a kind of, you can click through the link to get a calculation of exactly how Lighthouse came up with that calculation for your website. So they'll break out. Do you want to go to that one, Catherine? We got the Google Lighthouse one on there. Oh no, sorry. Okay, you can do that. No, I was meant we got a slide on it, haven't we? Sorry. Okay, well, I'll carry on. So basically, what Google Page Speed Insights gives you the lab data you can look at if you wish to, but also they'll suggest improvements under what they call opportunities and diagnostics, which is an in-depth kind of review of all the things that slumming your site. So it'll tell you your server took 1.8 seconds to respond. Your JavaScript is blocking the page loading for 0.95 seconds. And it'll give you a view of which bit of JavaScript is causing that problem. So you'll get a very full view of what needs to be looked at on your website in terms of improving it with Page Speed Insights. Lighthouse, as I said, is probably a little bit more, a disadvantage of Page Speed Insights. It is that you only look at a single web page only. So you'd have to kind of, if you've got thousands of web pages, it's going to take a long time to use Page Speed Insights to find out the data. There are other tools that you can do get bulk Page Speed Insights reports, like what was the one? Screaming Frog is one we use in-house. that enables you to run this across every single page on your website. Lighthouse is included with the Chrome DevTools. So there's a kind of you right click on a page and you'll get a kind of a page open with a whole bunch of stuff. And there's a Lighthouse link on there. And again, it's a single web page only. It gives you performance scores. They're not always exactly the same as PageSpeed Insights, the scores, because they use different devices and different locations, but they're kind of roughly similar. They'll give you an idea. And they do the same. They'll give you recommended improvements, but they generally give you a more detailed explanation of how the score was generated. So for instance, it will give you a performance tab where you can see the different stages of your website as it loads on a ticker. So and it will tell you, this is LCP, this is CLS issue, blah, blah, blah. So it'll do the whole lot. The last one's going to talk about was the Chrome UX report. The Chrome UX report is a fairly new thing developed by Google. It's a public data set of real user experience data on millions of websites. It measures the field results of all the core web vitals. And unlike the lab data, it comes from opted-in users in the field. And we use this. You can get a dashboard. You can download a dashboard. You need to sign up for Google Data Studio, but then you just go to Chrome UX Dash. We'll put the link in the resources. You can download it, and the beauty of it, what it does is it gives you a history of how your core web vitals have changed. So you can see as you make changes to your site, you can see, did it improve it this month as opposed to this time last year, which is a really useful tool to have. So there's no shortage of tools to help you understand how the website's performing. So it's probably useful to understand what kind of workflow you might use to kind of go through this. So initially, we might suggest to use Google Search Console. Google Search Console have two new tabs, Core Web Vitals and the Page Experience tab. And the only disadvantage of Search Console is it doesn't give you individual pages. It gives you groups of pages. But what it would enable to do is identify very quickly groups of pages that might require attention. You can then go to PageSpeed Insights, plug in the page they have given you, and get feedback on what the issues are on that page and how you might fix them. And because Google Search Console is giving you a group of pages, it could be, for instance, it could be all your article pages are having it could be all your article pages have the same problem on. So it could be a quick fix and you solve all those problems on your article pages. So just an aside, PageSpeed Insights is available directly from Google Search Console, or you can then go to PageSpeed Insights and enter your URL in there. Once you're ready to optimize your site, or say on a staging site, you can use Lighthouse and Chrome development tools to measure core web vitals and get the actual guidance on exactly what to fix. And as I said, there's also the Chrome user dashboard where you can get a kind of historical overview of how your website is performing. So what's next? So when you know Google's evaluate. Oh, sorry. Yep, let's go to that one. Sorry. Yep. So I forgot about those slides. Yep. Okay. So there you can see Google Search Console. You've got the two different tabs on the left-hand side. You've got Page Experience tab, which is the one you can see on the right, and the Core Web Vitals, which is the one on the left. And they'll give you a view of how many good URLs, how many poor URLs, what needs improvement, etc. And if you click on the Open Report, you'll then get a more detailed view of what pages or what groups of pages are causing the problems. The Page Experience report includes reporting on all the elements of the page experience. So you've got on there Core Web Vitals, security issues, ad experience, mobile usability, and HTTPS. If you get a tick against all them, you'll get some ranking benefit, we think. I've talked about this a bit earlier. Google PageSpeed Insights. So again, this will give you a score. So you can see on there, this has got field data. So if you haven't got field data, it will say here lab data instead of field data on the page at the top there. Yep. Oh, they got lab data right there, but on the left they'll say the same as well. So this gives you a view of kind of your first input delay, your largest contentful paint, and your cumulative layout shift score. And the 4% means 4% of users did not get a good experience from an LCP point of view. So probably this site is all right, 1.6 seconds. Well, it obviously is Google, so hopefully wouldn't fail their own test. And the same for the other ones as well. They passed all the tests there, apart from first Contentful Paint, and that is not yet a Core Web Vital, but of course it might be next year. And then you've got the lab data on the right hand side, which does the same thing, but obviously it's measured. It's not real user data. So if you've got user data, use that first. Lab data if you haven't. This is what I was talking about earlier about Lighthouse, giving you kind of a lot of detail on the sort of issues your website's having and how much time is being wasted on them with render blocking resources or unused JavaScript, initial server response time. So you get a full view of what's going on. If you click on the little down arrow, it will give you more detail on each of those elements and how you might improve them. This is the dashboard I was talking about, this Chrome user experience dashboard that we build this in Google Data Studio. But you get a view of, I think this is, mute myself there. So you're getting a view of the largest Contentful Paint for that site. So you can see here where it's got in the middle there, 2,700 milliseconds. That is basically means you're failing because the target is 2.5 for the 75th percentile. So it's saying for the 75th percentile, you're not quite meeting the target at the moment. But you can see how things have changed over the year, and you get one of these graphs for each of the Core Web Vitals. So you get one for first input delay, one for cumulative layout shift as well. These are other tools you can use. I think I mentioned Screaming Frog earlier. Screaming Frog is a great tool for SEO specialists like myself, because you can plug in a domain and it'll look at every single page on the website and give me feedback on how each page is scoring. Okay, just to kind of finish, just through a reminder of the solutions for Core Web Vitals. Focus on mobile first, because that's what's most important. Pick good hosting. Optimize your images. Review your third-party scripts and plugins. Do you need them all? Only load critical content above the fold, or critical elements above the fold, and use the site speed plugins that are available. These are slightly more complex ones. So things like we talked about CLS, add width and height for images in the CSS. So the browser reserves space for the images as loading. Content at every networks, we talked about that. Use the cloud, get your website loaded faster to more people across the world. And these two other things here, got AMP is an acronym for Accelerated Mobile Pages. And PWA is Progressive Web Apps. These are kind of two new frameworks. Well, not new. They've been around for a few years now, or certainly AMP has. And they're both backed by Google. AMP is basically, it's a framework for delivering web pages, slimmed down web pages to mobile phones. You'll see a lot of the news sites will use this to quickly deliver an article, say, for a mobile phone user. So it substantially reduces bounce rate and enables the website to be rendered really quickly. The only limitation on AMP is it does tend to, you have less functionality in terms of look and feel. So if you're a design-led website, this might not be ideal, but there may be certain pages which you could do AMP on. So for instance, WordPress has a plugin for AMP. And we know Google do show preference for AMP. They're not saying because it's AMP, because it makes the sites a lot faster. And a progressive web app, I won't talk an awful lot about this, but basically it's another one supported by Google. It's a sort of a hybrid between a website and an app. But unlike an app, you don't download it from Google Store or Apple. It's downloaded when they first visit the website. So it's really quick, and it's really good for if you've got a website that maybe visitors come to every couple of weeks. It'll make it a very good experience for those people. Finally, a disclaimer. There's not one thing that's guaranteed to fix all your issues. You'll have to take a broader view of optimizing your site. There are lots of little fixes you need to make a big difference. Thank you.